was just another night shift at the gas station. Kind of shift where time crawls and the world outside feels miles away. I've been working these hours for a while now, and I'm used to the stillness that settles in after midnight. The place is quiet, almost too quiet, with only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional car pulling up to break the silence. Most nights, it's just me and the endless rows of snacks and drinks. I'd spend the hours behind the counter, scrolling through my phone or watching the clock, counting down the minutes until my shift was over. The isolation can get to you sometimes. There's a certain peace in it too. It's like being in a bubble, cut off from the rest of the world. I had my routine down to a science. Restock the shelves, clean up a bit, keep an eye on the security cameras. Nothing exciting ever really happened on my watch. Just the usual late-night customers grabbing a coffee or filling up their tanks. Most of them were regulars, truckers passing through, locals on their way home from the night shift. They were predictable, familiar. It was a comfortable kind of monotony. There was always that underlying awareness, that quiet reminder in the back of my mind. Things could change in an instant. Working the night shift at a gas station, you never really know what or who might walk through those doors. It was around 2 a.m. when the door chimed and a man stumbled into the station. At first glance, he looked rough, like he'd been in some kind of fight. His clothes were dirty, and there was a nasty gash on his forehead. Blood trickled down the side of his face, and he seemed completely out of it, barely able to keep his balance. I should have stayed behind the counter, behind the glass where it was safe, but something about the way he was swaying, clutching his head, made me forget about the protocols. He didn't seem like a threat, just someone in serious need of help. So I stepped out from behind the counter and approached him, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey, are you okay? What happened?" I asked, but he didn't seem to hear me at first. His eyes were unfocused, darting around like he was trying to figure out where he was. When he finally looked at me, there was this blank, lost expression on his face. I don't know, he muttered, his voice shaky. "I don't know where I am." I glanced outside, expecting to see a wrecked car or something that might explain his condition, but there was nothing, just the empty parking lot. Didn't make any sense. He didn't seem to know how he got there, and I couldn't piece together how someone in his state ended up wandering into my station in the middle of the night. He kept mumbling, something about not remembering what happened, and the more he spoke, the more concerned I got. I knew I needed to call the police, get him some help, but there was this nagging feeling in my gut that something about the whole situation was off. Still, I couldn't just leave him there. So I dialed 911, trying to keep him calm while we waited for the cops to arrive. As soon as I realized how bad the situation was, I grabbed the phone and called the police. My hands were shaking a little, but I tried to stay calm as I explained what was going on. The dispatcher said they'd send someone right away, and for once, they weren't kidding. Within minutes, a couple of squad cars pulled into the lot, lights flashing. The officers came in, and I quickly pointed them to the man. He was still standing there, looking dazed, with that ugly gash on his head. One of the cops gently guided him to a chair, while the other started asking questions. What his name was, where he thought he was. But the guy was too out of it to give any straight answers. He just kept touching the wound on his head, like he was trying to make sense of it. Cops exchanged a look that told me they were thinking the same thing I was. This guy needed medical attention, and fast. One of them called for an ambulance, while the other continued trying to keep the man awake and talking. They were worried his head might be fractured, maybe worse, and I could see the tension in their faces. When the paramedics arrived, they loaded him onto a stretcher and took him to the hospital. Watching the ambulance drive off, I felt a huge sense of relief. The guy was out of my hands now, in the care of people who could actually help him. I was just glad it was over, that he was getting the attention he needed. I went back inside, trying to shake off the unease that still clung to me. At least the situation was under control, or so I thought. A few hours later, just when I'd started to settle back into the quiet routine, the same officers returned. They came in like it was any other night, asking for coffee. I figured they were just winding down after the earlier chaos, though I didn't think much of it. I poured their cups and we exchanged some small talk. Then, one of them looked at me and said, "You know that guy we took in? Turns out it wasn't just a random injury." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him, confused. He took a sip of his coffee, then continued, "The doctors found out his head wound was from a baseball bat. Apparently, he got it while trying to break into a girl's room. We ran his prints. He's wanted in 2 other states for rape and murder." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to process what he'd said. That guy, one I'd helped without a second thought, the violent criminal. He wasn't just some lost, injured stranger. He was dangerous, and I'd let him walk right into the station, even stepped out to help him. Couldn't believe how close I'd come to danger. If things had gone just a little differently, who knows what could have happened. The officers could see the shock on my face. One of them tried to reassure me, saying I'd done the right thing by calling them. But it didn't stop the chill running down my spine. When they left, it felt like I was in a daze. The whole situation played over and over in my mind. That night, I couldn't shake the image of him standing there, bloodied and lost, knowing now what he was really capable of. The realization that I'd been inches away from a killer was something I'd never forget. After that night, I made a decision. I would never leave the safety of the protected area during my shift again. It wasn't worth the risk. I kept thinking about how close I'd come to real danger, how easily things could have gone wrong. The thought still gives me chills. I replayed the events over and over, wondering what might have happened if the police hadn't arrived so quickly. It was hard to shake the image of that man, the look in his eyes when he didn't know where he was. But now I knew the truth. That confusion hid something far darker. Every night after that, I stayed behind the glass, no matter what. It wasn't just about following protocol, it was about survival. That sense of unease never really left me. It hung in the air, a constant reminder that you never really know who you're dealing with. I learned a hard lesson that night. Sometimes, trying to do the right thing can put you in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was lucky, but that experience changed the way I see my job and people. I'll never forget that night, or how close I came to something I never want to face again. Tonight, it's just me in the office. My job? Keeping the company's systems running smoothly, making sure nothing goes wrong overnight. Normally, I'd have a coworker here, someone to talk to during the long, quiet hours. But he called in sick, leaving me to handle the shift alone. The office feels different when you're by yourself. It's on the top floor of a tall building, with windows that stretch from floor to ceiling, offering a view of the city that would be beautiful if it weren't so unsettling in the dark. The only light comes from the monitors, casting an eerie glow across the room. The servers hum softly in the background, a constant reminder that I'm not entirely alone, but it's cold comfort. Everything seems still, too still, as if the building itself is holding its breath. It's the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every creak, every flicker of movement in the shadows. I tell myself it's just another night, but something feels off. There's a heaviness in the air that I can't shake, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I'm not as alone as I thought. As the night drags on, I start to hear things that shouldn't be there. At first, it's just a faint sound, like someone whispering far off in the distance. I dismiss it, figuring it's my mind playing tricks on me. But then, there's a creak, like footsteps in the stairwell. I freeze, straining to listen, but the sound fades away. I remind myself that I'm the only one here. No one else should be in the building, especially at this hour. Then, the lights begin to flicker. It's subtle at first, a brief dimming that I barely notice, but it happens again, and this time it's more pronounced. The overhead lights, which have always been steady, now waver like they're struggling to stay on. I glance at the monitors. They're still running fine, no sign of a power issue. But the flickering continues, and with it, the noises grow louder. The whispers are closer now, almost as if they're just outside the door, and the footsteps echo in the hallway. A knot tightens in my stomach. I try to focus on my work, but it's impossible. The tension in the air is suffocating, pressing in from all sides. Every time the lights flicker, I feel a jolt of fear. It's as if the building is alive and it's trying to tell me something. I can't take it anymore. The whispers, flickering lights, the strange creaks and groans of the building, it's all too much. My job is to keep everything running smoothly, and that includes dealing with anything out of the ordinary. So, with my heart pounding in my chest, I grab a flashlight and step out of my office. The hallway is eerily quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of electricity running through the walls. I start down the corridor, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. Every few feet, the lights overhead flicker, casting the shadows in strange, unsettling ways. I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, lurking, just out of sight. As I make my way down the stairs, the whispers grow louder, almost as if they're following me. I stop at the landing, trying to pinpoint where they're coming from. But it's like they're coming from everywhere at once. I glance down the stairwell and catch a glimpse of movement, a shadow darting across the lower floor. My breath catches in my throat, but when I shine my flashlight down, there's nothing there. I push on, descending floor by floor, but the further I go, the worse it gets. The air feels thick, almost suffocating, and the whispers are now a constant, droning hum in the back of my mind. I check every room, every corner, find nothing out of place. No signs of anyone or anything that could be causing this. The deeper I go, the more it feels like the building is closing in on me. The walls pressing tighter, the air growing heavier. By the time I reach the lower levels, my nerves are shot. My flashlight flickers, matching the erratic lights above, and I'm sure I see something out of the corner of my eye. Just a fleeting glimpse of movement. But every time I turn to look, there's nothing there. It's like the building itself is playing tricks on me, leading me deeper into its depths. And all I'm left with is this gnawing sense of dread that something is very, very wrong. Just when I'm about to give up, I run into the night security guard near the lobby. He's leaning against the desk, looking completely at ease, like nothing unusual is happening. It throws me off. I'm on edge, practically jumping at every shadow, and here he is, as calm as can be. I blurt out what's been happening, the voices, the flickering lights, the strange sense of being watched. He listens quietly, nodding along, but there's this knowing look in his eyes that makes me uneasy. When I finish, he sighs and looks down for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell me. Then he starts talking, his voice low and steady. He tells me that 9 years ago, on the floor just below my office, a woman took her own life. She worked late, often alone, just like me. One night, something in her snapped, and she jumped. They found her the next morning. Since then, strange things have been happening in the building, especially around this time of year. He says the lights always flicker. People hear things they can't explain, feel a presence they can't shake. I feel a cold chill run down my spine as he talks. The more he says, the more everything starts to make a twisted kind of sense. He hints that these disturbances always peak around the anniversary of her death, like tonight. He doesn't come out and say it's a ghost, but the implication is clear. The connection between what I've been experiencing and the tragedy that happened here hits me hard, and I'm left standing there, feeling more disturbed than ever. I make my way back to the office, but everything feels different now. Every creak, every flicker, every shadow seems more sinister, like the building is alive with something dark. I sit at my desk, trying to focus on the monitors, but my mind keeps drifting back to what the guard told me. The whispers, the footsteps, they don't stop. If anything, they get louder, more insistent. I can feel my pulse racing, my skin cold with sweat. The hours drag by, each minute feeling like an eternity. Keep glancing at the door, half expecting to see something or someone there. By the time dawn starts to break, I'm barely holding it together. I grab my things and leave without a second thought, the building's heavy silence pressing down on me the entire way out. As I step into the early morning light, I feel a brief sense of relief. But it doesn't last. The dread lingers, constant knot in my stomach. I'm not sure I can go back there. Not after what I've heard. Not after what I've felt. The thought of returning makes my skin crawl. But the alternative, quitting, giving up, feels like letting that darkness win. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that something is waiting for me in that building. Something that won't let go so easily. I don't know if it's haunted, or if my mind is playing tricks on me. But I do know one thing. Whatever happened there, it's not over. Not for me. Not yet. I'm a 45-year-old night watchman, working the graveyard shift at a large industrial facility. The job's usually quiet, especially on nights like this. Rain pouring down in steady sheets, muffling any sound from outside. Most nights, I appreciate the peace. Gives me time to think, clear my head. But tonight, something feels off. I can't shake the feeling as I start my rounds. The silence isn't just quiet, it's heavy, almost oppressive, like the whole building is holding its breath. I've done this shift countless times, but tonight, the emptiness feels different, like the shadows are deeper, corners darker. Something's not right, but I can't quite put my finger on it. As I make my way through the facility, I hear something that stops me in my tracks. Footsteps, echoing in the distance. At first, I think I'm imagining things, but they keep going, steady and deliberate. I head to the security room, checking the cameras one by one. Nothing. Every screen shows the same empty hallways, the same silent machinery. But the footsteps don't stop. They seem to follow me, growing louder, closer. My heart starts pounding in my chest. I know this place inside out, and I know I'm alone. But those footsteps, they're real. The sound bounces off the walls, surrounding me, making it impossible to tell where they're coming from. I've never felt fear like this on the job before, and I can't shake the sense that something is here with me, something I can't see. The footsteps won't stop. They seem to move around me, like they're circling, getting closer. My hands start to shake as I double-check everything. The doors, the windows, the locks, all secure, just as they should be. But it doesn't calm me. The feeling of being watched grows stronger with every passing minute. I glance over my shoulder constantly, expecting to see something, someone, but there's nothing there. It's just me in this empty building, yet it feels like I'm not alone. My breath quickens, my pulse races. The noises aren't just random anymore. They have a purpose, a direction. Something is out there, just beyond the edge of my sight, and it's getting closer. As I'm patrolling the darkened halls, my radio crackles to life with a news update. The voice on the other end describes a fugitive who escaped from a nearby prison. My blood runs cold when they mention that the last sighting was near the industrial facility. The footsteps, the ones I thought were just my imagination, take on a whole new meaning. My heart races as the reality hits me. I'm not just hearing things. There's someone here, someone dangerous. I try to keep my breathing steady, fighting the urge to panic. Every shadow, every sound feels like a threat now. I can't afford to make any noise or give away my position. The fugitive could be lurking just around the corner, watching my every move. I move cautiously, checking every nook and cranny, all the while trying to stay out of sight. The thought of the fugitive being so close, fear of what might happen if I'm found, grips me tightly. I make one final sweep of the facility, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, each step heavy with dread. The silence is almost deafening now, broken only by the thudding of my own heart. I check every corner, every storage room, my hands trembling as I move. Suddenly, I spot a shadow shift just beyond the beam of my flashlight. My blood runs cold as I see him, a man, wild-eyed and disheveled, standing in the doorway. It's the fugitive. He's been here all along, hiding in the shadows, waiting. Fear grips me, and my instincts scream at me to run. I barely manage to turn and sprint for the nearest exit, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind me. I bolt into the night, adrenaline pumping, barely escaping as the facility's heavy door slams shut behind me. Safe outside, I look back, trying to catch my breath. The terror of what just happened doesn't fade easily. I keep replaying the encounter in my mind, the close call with someone so dangerous. The fear lingers long after, constant reminder of how close I came to a nightmare.